here to salute our departed comrade, Larry Nadelson, and to bid him farewell.
It is a will that we are here. My comrades were here is one that shared with us in the defense of our country and who bore the same distinction we do. Whether his life was brief, whether he was outnumbered by 70, he was known to all the world the same title we bear, a veteran and a Jew. Larry was a noble person in our ranks. I've known him for a long time, and it was really a pleasure and a distinction. And as he aided through the U.S. Navy in the defense of us beloved country, and all who have worn this uniform of our country, our comrades forever and throughout eternity, it is a bond that death cannot break. Let us therefore pray in this dark hour of his departure. Let this realm from the realm of eternal life, that our comrade be received in mercy before the throne of God, and there be sheltered by him and with his protecting grace. Let us likewise pray that all the love that he created, that all the good that he performed here on earth may endure in the hearts and the lives of his dear ones.
Almighty God, whose protecting arm has shielded our comrade and has spared Larry to us and to his family until this hour, we thank you for the service he has rendered within the circle of his family, his friends, and his comrades, and for the larger service he has rendered to the two great causes we hold dear, our country and our faith. Bless his endeavors and grant that the United States and the people of Israel may secure those blessings which he ardently desired for them. So may he continue to live among us through the fulfillment of the ideals he cherished. And so may his memorial here on earth endure forever. Amen.
No words can adequately describe our feelings. Our comrade has left us, and we are powerless to describe our loss. Gone from us, Larry Nadelson, our comrade. You are at peace in the realm of eternity. Eagerly would we express our feelings deeper than words can tell. Many of us have known Larry for many, many years, over 20 years. When I think of Larry and Esther Rose, I think of Larry as a gentleman and an officer. Many of you probably think of the gentleman and officer as that movie, I guess it was Tom Cruise was involved in that movie. Tom Cruise was not a gentleman and officer. Larry Nadelson. Whenever we spoke to Larry, anybody, he never yelled, never raised his voice, but he was an officer and you had to listen to him. He really was somebody that you had to respect, even toward the end. He will be missed. I look at somebody like Larry from not only the time they've been in the military, for over 20 years as a lieutenant commander, but also after they left the military. Well, let me say a couple things about when he was in the military. And we spoke right before I went to Iraq, and he was saying that he was stationed in Iran, and that was one of his best places that he was ever assigned to. I kept thinking, in Iran? But it was before the revolution. So it gave him an opportunity to see a culture there, as well as in many other places throughout the world, that we don't get exposed to. Larry explained to me some of what the Muslim culture is about in Iran. And he told me some ways to act in Iraq. And it was true what he said. And he told me a lot of other things I'm not going to say to you. But it was all good. Esther Rose, I'm sorry. It was all good. I'm sure Mike Roloff will get into other things when he gives his presentation. No, I don't want to put Mike on the spot. When you leave the military, even if it's after a short period of time, you actually are looked at by how you treat your family, how you treat your community, and how you support military and veterans afterwards. In every one of those categories, Larry has exceeded everybody else I can think of, because he always, when you asked him to do something, he always volunteered. I'm thinking about several times when we had the welcome home ceremonies, or when people were departing for Iraq or Afghanistan. Always there, always wanted to do more, always wanted to help out. He has a beautiful family, obviously. Nobody can debate that. Loved his children and grandchildren, especially you, Esther Rose. Now let me digress for a second. It's been quite a while that Larry's been sick. You've taken him to many meetings. You've been by his side. Not many people, even a wife or spouse of any, or a male, if it was a male spouse, would have done that. Thank you. And I'm sure Larry appreciated you every last day. And I know he loved you. Always said good things about you. I can remember also when we went to the joint base for different things, the Hanukkah parties, for giving the aquatic equipment to the wounded warriors. Larry was there, Esther Rose was there, but most importantly, Debbie and myself always saw them in the exchange. We always seemed to meet each other in the exchange. That's something with military people. You always seem to end up in the exchange to just look around even if you don't buy anything. Well, Larry complained quite a bit about the exchange because usually at that time he didn't have enough Navy stuff in particular. Well, Larry, I don't know if you've been there recently, Esther Rose, maybe you haven't been there recently, but they have changed it. It's a joint base now. So they have a lot of Navy stuff, which pushed out a lot of the Air Force stuff that I like. But at the same time, they have some Marine stuff there too, because it is truly a joint base with the Marines and the Coast Guard are there. But it was a warm feeling when we saw them in the exchange, or we saw them in any other location, and I'm sure everybody feels the same way. Family, friends, military, while you're in the military, supporting them even when you're out of the military, and veterans. That was Larry. There's a lot of things we could say about Larry. It's all good. He always, like I said, always wanted to help out wherever he possibly could. Didn't always have the energy toward the end, but we knew he was there in spirit, and we want to support him wherever possible. God bless Larry, God bless his family, God bless the United States of America. We will miss you, Larry. This flag we have placed on your coffin on behalf of a beloved country, for whose integrity our comrades have served. Honor, peace, patriotism, and love. May these be forever associated with Larry Nadelson and with the memory of all the departed comrades. Let the Department of New Jersey, your Post Larry 126 of the Jewish War Veterans of the United States of America, which is pledged to shield from neglect the graves of the heroes, be true and sacred to you and to all the others that have departed. Veterans in the audience, veterans on the stage, please rise while we present a salute to our departed comrade, Larry Nadelson. Now,
Lord, you have been our refuge in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, before you formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. But man, you turn into dust and say, return to me, all children of men. Man is like grass, which flourishes and grows in the morning, but in the evening is cut down and withers. We bring our years to an end as a tale that is told. Teach us to number our days, that we may get us a heart of wisdom. Let your work appear to your servants, and your glory upon their children. And let the grace of God, the Lord, be upon us. Establish the work of all our hands. Amen.
Comrades, attention, and salute. Order, arms.
During the service, we will not pay respect to family. Please.
Do you think our friend won't mind if I bring this sprinkler? This Spinky?
That's gonna sleep. As we are about to begin our service, will you please turn off all electronic devices or place them in silent mode? Thank you.
Somebody is in front of the table. And somebody is in front of the table. Two people are next to the table.
The words of Psalm 121. Yes, I know Adonai tzilcha yadinecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakecha v'yareach halayla Adonai yishmarcha mikora yishmor et nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzeitecha u'voecha me'ata
I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, the maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and your coming, now and forever. When a person is born, we can only imagine what the nature of his life will be. We do not yet know the places he will go or the people whose lives he will touch. We don't know his character or his strength. We don't know the kind of man, the kind of husband, father, grandfather, friend that he will be. But when a person's soul departs this world, we do indeed know these things. And in knowing them and knowing the challenges and the joys that fill the days of his life, we appreciate his life's journey even more. Today we gather to accompany Larry to his final resting place I'm joined by Cantor Harrison and also know that Cantor Hockman is here with us as well as we take this time to remember Larry and as we think of the journey that was his life and the blessings and the legacy of love he leaves behind for those who had the opportunity to know him. To Larry's immediate family, we offer our deepest condolences and our prayers for as much comfort as possible as you each move through these days ahead. To Larry's wife, Esther Rose, to his children, Andrea and Rob, along with Chad and Anita, and to Larry's grandchildren, Sophie, Maya, and Isla. For we recognize that grief is the heavy price we pay for having the courage to love others as deeply as we do. And when clergy sit down to write a eulogy, it is certainly a sacred task, but it's often an overwhelming one as well, trying to encapsulate someone's life and what was most important to them in several minutes worth of memories. But as I spent time with Larry and with his family at Samaritan Hospice the other day, sitting on the table next to his bed was an autobiography that Larry had written some years ago, noting what he himself felt were the most notable aspects of his life. And while I hope that the opportunity will be there through these days of Shiva to share all of the pieces of Larry's autobiography, this morning I want to share just a few. Larry was born in Brooklyn in 1934 into humble circumstances and as an only child. He called himself an average student in school but loved to draw and was accepted to the High School of Music and Art. And while in high school, he heard through a friend about the process of becoming an extra at the Metropolitan Opera in Manhattan. And Larry started doing this 1 to 2 evenings a week, playing various roles in famous operas, making $1 for each show. In Larry's own words, it was thrilling being on stage at the Met, and it was there that I acquired a lifelong appreciation of grand opera. However, it was in 1957, on the day he was commissioned as a line officer in the U.S. Navy, that he referred to in his autobiography as his proudest day. He was assigned to the USS Saratoga in the communications department, and during his deployment, Larry wrote of a conflict erupting in Lebanon, and the Saratoga was assigned to provide air support to the American Marines who landed there. Larry wrote, "The highlight was my takeoff from the Saratoga in a small plane to deliver some top-secret documents to the Marines in Beirut. Landing back on the Saratoga afterwards, that big ship suddenly seemed so small in that big ocean." Afterwards, Larry received orders assigning him as the officer in charge of the cryptographic repair school, and his time in the Navy took him to Virginia, San Diego, to Georgia as a supply officer, and he was later assigned to a survey ship, the USS Tanner. He was stationed in Port Washington and then Iran, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. And Larry also recounted how meaningful it was to be awarded the Navy Achievement Medal for his service with the Naval Mobile Construction Battalion, known as the Seabees. And finally, before his retirement from the Navy, he was a Navy exchange officer at the Naval Shipyard in Philadelphia. And it was at his home in the Meadowbrook apartment complex where Larry met Esther Rose. I'm told that the apartment complex was known as a hot spot for newly divorced men and women. And while Larry had never been married before, he didn't want to admit that to many of the people he met at the apartment complex. So when they asked about his assumed previous marriage, he would just say that it was too painful to talk about. And it was at a wine and cheese event that Larry spotted Esther Rose in her red blouse, Larry's favorite color. They talked over backgammon, and Larry asked Esther Rose to a matinee show. And as they got to know one another, Larry would routinely ask Esther Rose what her 5-year plan was. And she took that as his way of indicating how serious he was about their relationship. Typically, we would say that the rest is history, but in this case, not quite. Larry knew that if he was going to be married and support a wife and soon-to-be family, he had to get a job. So he began working at RCA. And Esther Rose, for her part, had 3 important requirements of her own before she would agree to be married. Larry would not expect her to iron shirts. She would get to keep her maiden name, and their family would belong to a synagogue. And when they moved to Cherry Hill, and Esther Rose once again talked to Larry about synagogue membership after hearing a recommendation of Makor Shalom, all Larry wanted to know was which synagogue was closest to their home, and Makor Shalom was it. And we as a synagogue community have been blessed to have shared so many special moments with you and your family throughout the years. Larry was an intellectual, devouring multiple newspapers each day, and loved to read, listen to classical music, and physical fitness was also very important to him. He was an avid swimmer, loved playing pool, enjoyed playing tennis with his JCC friends, and when it got too cold for that outside, they would switch to ping pong. And while he was an older father age-wise, Andrea recalled how much energy he still had and would play with her and Rob in the yard. And he was fun, going to amusement parks and riding roller coasters with them. And yet, as a military father, he expected a lot, but he also left a lot of the hard parenting to Esther Rose and would often like to play the good cop role when Andrea would ask permission to do something. As his children shared, most of all, he wanted to see us succeed, and knowing that we are married and have good careers gave him a sense of peace. He could leave us knowing that we are comfortable and well taken care of. And Larry also loved his role as a grandfather, whether it was FaceTiming with his granddaughters or simply holding them. And while he secretly hoped for a grandson, often saying when hearing of a new pregnancy, "I don't care about the sex as long as he's healthy," Larry could not have been happier when all 3 girls were born. The end of Larry's autobiography is a paragraph about being diagnosed with Parkinson's and how loyal and loving Esther Rose was throughout. He ends his words with the following: "My life can be separated into 2 parts. My single life as a naval officer, traveling to various parts of the world, wrapped up in my career while making sure my mother, whom I adored, was well taken care of. The second part of my life was devoted to my family, from whom I received so much joy as I witnessed their happiness." And I know that Larry felt your love and care and compassion as you surrounded him in these final days of his life. And while I know his last few days came sooner than you would imagine they would, from the moments and memories that you shared with me, I also know that he continues to live so deeply in your hearts. In that way, may each of you always remember that the bonds of love are so much stronger than death. As you walk this journey of grief together, may you also know that his legacy and his spirit are very much still present in your lives and in the world. If you will join me now as we together recite Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We now continue as a few family and friends share remembrances and memories. The first, reading a letter from Arlene, Esther Rose's cousin who lives in Israel. We call upon Renee Hollander. It's entitled, Goodbye, Larry. I was so sorry to receive a message from Esther Rose with the sad news that Larry had passed away. I think I will always remember him as a person with deep commitment to life. I was always impressed with his determination to keep on going no matter how hard it was for him with Parkinson's disease. He was always interesting, and I enjoyed talking to him whenever I came to visit. I remember when I came in for Andrea's bat mitzvah and had to get to Newark for my flight. Larry drove me to the airport, which I really appreciated. Esther Rose told me that Larry must really like me because he wasn't willing to do that for any of the other guests. I think he realized that the feeling was mutual. He and Esther Rose made a life together and had 2 wonderful children. From all that he talked to me about Robbie and Andrea, I knew that he was very proud of them. He was proud of their achievements and happy to see them married with children of their own. I remember him for being a nice guy, an interesting guy, and one who had courage to fight on when others would have given up. Bye, Larry. I'll remember you. Arvin. We now call upon Larry's family friend, Mike Perloff.
Now, for the record, several years ago, Larry asked me if I would speak at his funeral. We went back and forth. We agreed as long as I don't have to wear a tie, it's a deal. Now, I'm pretty sure, I'm absolutely sure, that at this particular juncture, Larry would much rather be playing ping pong or shooting pool, okay? You gotta do what you gotta do, Larry. I'm not going to tell you about his career in the Navy or his importance as a husband, father, or grandfather. I'm just his friend, just his friend. I don't really remember when we actually met. It was sometime in the mid-1990s. And I think it was while our wives were going to services on Friday night at McCourt Shalom. We had our own religious observance. Remember when Borders used to have music every Friday night? So we attended Congregation Beth Borders. Well, while he worked at the JCC, I would sometimes go to work out. And Kathy would say when I got home, "What took so long? Did you work out?" No, I was talking to Larry. And what did we speak about? Well, sometimes it was politics. Sometimes it was the physical attributes of some of the women that we happened to observe. We kept it between ourselves. But, you know, we would guess about just about anything. But through it all, I have to say, he truly was a gentleman. He was dignified, but without being stuffy or full of himself. You know what I mean? Yes.
He was also quite influential in the South Jersey Men's Club. In the year 2000, he agreed to be, thank goodness, my successor. Couldn't find anybody who wanted to do it, and he stepped up. As several people said, he was a man of commitment, and he did a marvelous job. I first remember Larry, though, when we had a program for the South Jersey Men's Club called Jews in the Military. And it was quite astounding. And this was, again, in the early 1990s. And most of us who had not had the experience of traveling to different parts of the world were quite surprised. And amongst the men who spoke on our panel, most of them became members of the men's club afterwards. But the further away you get from a concentration of Jewish families, the closer the Jews become. So he had some very interesting stories, which I won't relate. Yes, on his 75th birthday, and he was a cultured man. We had a birthday dinner at a little Italian restaurant in in South Philly. My goodness, we were serenaded by opera singing by the waiters and the chef. And that didn't make too much sense until I read his biography that he was a $1 a day extra for the Metropolitan Opera. He was a real history buff, and though he was a commander, he always answered when I called Admiral. He really did. Now, an interesting thing was one of his jobs post-retirement from the service was working as purchasing agent for a company that had a contract for non-military supplies for the Egyptian army. When they asked for books or something like that, he would order things that he wanted to read. He'd read them first and then send them. On occasion, the four of us, Kathy, Esther Rose, Larry, and myself, would go down to far, far South Jersey. You know, it's funny, people in North Jersey think Trenton is South Jersey. We know. Down in Salem County, we would go to some of these wineries. Now, here's a bit of an irony, or I suppose you might call it. We went to a particular one called the Auburn Road Winery. And you should have seen Larry perk up when he learned that they supplied the wine that was used for ceremonies on the U.S. New Jersey battleship. Well, another thing on one of our road trips that occurred was he actually was on a boat with us when we went, I don't know if you've ever done this, but all the way down in Salem County is Fort Mott. And it's a very interesting place. It's a real fort. So we did a walking tour down there. And we went took the little boat to get to Fort Delaware. And he really knew what he was doing. And he was telling us little things about this and that when it came to being on a boat. But here's an interesting thing that occurred during one of our walks. And this was only a few years ago. We're taking a walk, and it was one of those Voorhees trails, not far from here. I couldn't keep up with the man. He was walking so quickly. All of a sudden, he starts shuffling along. And he's yelling at himself because his body would not listen to his mind. That was the first time I understood how devious Parkinson's was. And he suffered through it, and I think he maintained his dignity throughout. Did a nice job. Well, all these are just a few anecdotes that barely touch on the depth of the relationship that the four of us had, but they're some of my fondest memories. In ending, Larry was a friend of mine, and I will miss him. Thank you.
Finally, we will hear from Larry's daughter, Andrea.
all for being here. It means a lot to be surrounded by so much family and friends at this time. I'd like to share some memories with you, my dad from growing up. As many of you know, my dad was an officer in the Navy for over 20 years before he met my mom. I'd like to think he led an entire life even before I was born. I was born when he was 50, but I think it's the quality of our years with him rather than the quantity. He was very active and healthy and played with us as kids, as any younger father would do. He would always call me his favorite daughter. He always wanted to make my brother and I laugh, and we had a lot of inside jokes and funny faces that we would always make at each other. One of my fondest memories is that my mom really, really wanted my dad and I to go to a father-daughter square dance together when I was maybe 8. My dad and I begrudgingly said yes to humor my mom. We got in the car, and my dad said to me, "Do you really want to go to this thing?" And I said, "Not really." And I asked him the same, and he said, "Not really." And we both decided to ditch it and go to McDonald's and then the park. It was a great father-daughter day I'll always remember, and it was our little secret for a long time. He just wanted to see my brother and I happy and successful in life as we got older. He wanted us to have good careers and have a good family. And I know he loved both Chad and Anita dearly. He was a loving grandfather and was thrilled to have grandchildren, even though none of them turned out to be a grandson. Later in life, when my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's, it was most difficult to watch. My dad was always so strong mentally and physically throughout his life, and he still was as he was fighting until the very end. Although his disease was frustrating, he never wanted to miss any moments with his family. And although at times he was a man of few words, he always knew the right words that mattered. Dad, I love you much. I love you very much, always. And I'll always carry you in my heart with me.
Words from the Israeli poet Hannah Senech. יש כוכבים שאורם מגיע ארצה, רק השם עצמם נבזו לעינם. יש אנשים שזיו זכרם מאיר, כאשר הם עצמם אינם עוד בתוכנו. עוד אלה המלחיקים בהשקעת הליל, הם שמראים לאדם את הדרך, הם שמראים לאדם את הדרך. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we love. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember as we live our days. These are the ways
In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. I invite you to please rise for our memorial prayer of El Malay Rahman.
במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר רקיע מסתירים את נשמת ליבו בן השל נכה, שהלך לעולמו, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר
Passionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Larry Nadelson, Label Ben Heschel Benecha, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence and in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul always be bound up in the bonds of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he now rest in peace. And together we sing. Amen. Please be seated. Interment will follow our chapel service this morning at Beth Israel Cemetery in Woodbridge, and the family will be sitting Shiva at Esther Rose's home in Centennial Mills in Voorhees Saturday evening through Wednesday evening, with minion services each evening beginning at 7:30.
Have the pallbearers, please. Let's give the rise once more, please.
למען שמו, עם
Baruch lefanai shulchan,
Be seated, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask that you kindly remain seated.
The reason I know Adam is because his daughter is roasted out. Ask him about that on Monday.
Okay, fine. Congratulations, that's a good luck. Would you like to just
I know you don't know who I am.
I'm sorry.
I know you don't know who I am, but maybe by my voice. This is for you. Joy.
Joy.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you for your princess.
Josh? Stop this. here, go someplace. Talk to you later.
Brother, thank you. Is there anything specific that you need me to do, or just stay away?